I think a lot of people, they don't understand past the point of, okay, I need to restrict food, but what is the actual cost? And I think the more specific you can be with yourself around like what that actually looks like, what that entails, I think the better prepared you're going to be, and the lower likelihood you're going to have unmet expectations. So people, they want to see, yes, they want to see the scale drop, but we can all agree if you're in a fat loss phase, if you're not seeing the scale drop, ultimately that's going to be pretty discouraging. But are you willing to do the things that are oftentimes exactly what needs to happen to ensure you don't fall off track, you don't fail the diet? So this could mean making sure that there is accuracy in the food reporting. So if you're not used to using a scale, this could very well mean using a scale at all turning points, because you know that you have the tendency to eyeball things, and when you're a little hungrier, how you size things up and your depth of perception, it becomes a little skewed. This can also mean that, like, instead of skipping logging, instead of choosing to not account for the little extras like the sauces or the condiments, or when you go out to eat, like knowing, okay, well, I know this food has a little more fat than what is actually reflected in my Fitness Pal, but you know what, fuck it, I'm just gonna go with the log because that allows me to still have the almond butter late at night. Even though looking at this food, like for sure there were like 2 ounces of butter put on this chicken. It's like, yes, I know, like, you technically didn't order it that way, but if that's what you're eating, if you're eating food that is ultimately going to contain more calories, and you're kind of turning the other cheek to it, it's like those calories are accounted for in your body. Like, your body is going to be very accurate, very honest with you around your total intake. Now, another area is going to be food selection. So continuity in food selection. I can't tell you how many people that I've worked with them for long periods of time, and like I found out down the road, I'm like, oh, you're tracking net carbs and you're tracking macros. Okay, well, this makes a lot of sense why you're not losing weight as readily as I would assume. And that's one that, like, I know there's controversy around. I know people will say, well, like, I'm not consuming these carbs, are not being stored, so like, why can't I subtract them? I know there's science to support it, but frankly, unless you are hitting the same foods every single day, there is a discrepancy in how many of those carbs are excreted and absorbed. And I would say generally is, if you're someone who the hunger signaling is getting higher, if you're in a contest prep, if you're in a deep fat loss phase, this isn't a position that I would put you in that I would expect you to have high integrity with, because frankly, it is all too easy to make these adjustments to your meal plan, to your macros for the day, to support foods that, yeah, you can technically log as foods that are not going to contain the same carb source. But frankly, how can we be 100% sure that there aren't trace carbs being absorbed? And if that's making up a bulk of the carbs that you're eating for that day, it makes complete sense why we might see discrepancies in your fat loss that week. Now, I think another issue involved in like just inconsistencies are weigh-ins. And I think a lot of people, they don't realize the importance of having something that is objective and measured day to day, but also reflected and interpreted based on the average compared to the range, and how that changes week to week. And this is something that like people will get kind of hung up on and be like, okay, well, I don't like the idea of having to weigh myself every day. Like, mentally, that causes a lot of anxiety, a lot of stress. And I think for me personally, like I was that individual, so I can empathize. I would get very emotional if I saw that scale weight fluctuate day to day, despite being 100% adherent. I think once I was able to normalize seeing those fluctuations and understand that even if I'm 100% adherent, those fluctuations are absolutely expected and are not indicative that I did anything wrong. Which, I mean, like, as I'm saying it, it's like you have to learn how to not take scale weight personally. Like, scale weight is as objective as it comes. It does not tell the full story. And when you can begin to distill out that this is strictly just the total weight that you are carrying around on your body at any given point. It is not telling you a body fat percentage. It's not telling you an adherence rate, which oftentimes I think people tend to associate scale weight in the trend day to day is a reflection of whether or not you worked hard enough or you did enough the previous day. And that is just so false. I think that having a reliable system to weigh in and a weigh in schedule that ultimately sets you up so that you do weigh in whether or not digestion is regular, whether or not sleep is abnormal or not, I think that's absolutely essential. And yes, I'm going to recommend that people they aim to weigh themselves at the same time each and every day, ideally first thing in the morning after using the bathroom under similar conditions. And if you do have wild fluctuations in sodium, in fluid balance, or even like sleep patterns, even stress levels, like of course, like these things are going to impact that weigh-in. And what I recommend, and it's something that I struggled with a long time, but it really, like, once I was able to get control of it, I was like, okay, this is much less exhausting to feel like seeing that weigh-in is now going to dictate how I eat today. When I was able to remove that and just say like, nope, this is just a data collection. Like I am a worker for my coach, who I also am. I am the coach, and my boss, my coach, needs me to take my weigh-in 7 days a week, and I need to not get emotional about it. I can have feelings about it. I can be like, yeah, it kind of fucking bums me out. I thought I was going to weigh less. But before making that assumption, before jumping to that conclusion around, well, I don't weigh less because I didn't do enough, I'm going to collect 7 data points and then make that assessment. And rather than judge my low weigh-in off my high weigh-in last week, I'm going to look at my weekly average, which is based on 7 data points. I'm going to consider whether or not there was any muddying or inflation of the weigh-ins that is like objectively artificial. And if that's the case, okay, I don't get upset about that because that is not an accurate weigh-in. And I think that's where, if you are able to make that separation and be like, okay, this weigh-in is not accurate, it is falsified. It is like this summary of data is reflected of 3 nights of shitty sleep, getting my, like, if you can do that, I promise you will experience a lot less of like the mental anguish that comes with taking your scale weight day to day. Now, the reality is a lot of people, they're going to hear this and they're going to be like, that is insane. That is way too much data collection and it's unnecessary. We should just be able to go off visuals, go off pictures. Fine, do it then. Fine, go off of that. But I'm telling you, for myself, for the clients I work with, I want to have some certainty in how I'm doing, like just an objective measure of like, how well is this diet going? Like how good am I doing at this fat loss thing? And I think one, in terms of having buy-in to a process that like you can expect to be hungry, you can expect to want to eat more than what you're currently eating. And if that's the case, I want to set myself up so that going into this diet, I have that as a reasonable expectation, but I have some like positive reinforcement to be like, well, yeah, this might suck dick, but like, frankly, because I know that I'm going to see that average scale weight go down week to week, ultimately, it's worth however uncomfortable it is to potentially feel hungry, to potentially feel like, okay, like I don't feel my tightest, I'm not quite where I want to be, whatever the mental or physical discomfort is. If you have that positive reinforcement that, like, frankly is predicated on having the set expectations at the beginning of the diet, ultimately, I think it's going to put you in a better position to see out the remaining time that you have left of the diet. I think without this level of precision, but mostly the consistency, you honestly are just setting yourself up for disappointment.